You're listening to Exploring Engagement with James Dykeman.
Being able to reach out to the office and know that they've got lots of faculty engaged in lots of different kinds of community engaged projects is really helpful.
Hello to our listeners, and thank you for joining me today for the second part in a three-part series discussing community engagement at the University of Iowa, what it means for faculty and students, and how Hawkeyes are impacting communities across the state of Iowa. Today's guest is Heidi Lung, Associate Professor of Instruction for Museum Studies in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Iowa. We're going to be discussing community engagement from the faculty perspective and what it is like hosting a class that connects students with community partners. Hello, Heidi, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Can you give our listeners an overview of your experience as a faculty member involved in community engaged coursework?
Well, in my particular role, I teach museum studies, which can mean a lot of things depending on the day. And so some days I'm teaching history, some days I'm teaching nonprofit management, some days I'm teaching collections management and how to care for those historic and artistic artifacts and pieces of art. And so in my role as a faculty member, one of the things that I am very passionate about and feel very strongly about when I'm developing learning experiences for my students, who are really the future museum workers. That's how I see them. I want to give them experiences that connect them directly to the field.
I understand that you're committed to statewide engagement. Can you explain more about that?
You know, a lot of my role as a faculty member is teaching. So it's teaching those emerging professionals in museum studies practices. But in addition to teaching, I also do service and I do research in the field. And so I found that to really make the most of the work that I want to be doing in the field and the impact I want to make is to become connected with professional networks. And so I currently serve as president of the Iowa Museum Association. It's a statewide professional network. And through that organization, I'm able to work with museums all across the state. So that service work and the projects that we do, we have several initiatives to support museums throughout the state in the work that they do. So in a lot of ways, I'm teaching professionals on my faculty role here on campus, but I'm also supporting professionals in the field by providing them resources and support to best practices in the work that they're doing directly with museums.
Can you explain more about how the engagement activities that you have developed as part of your classroom experience has assisted smaller communities in Iowa?
I can give you one very concrete and specific example. One of my first community engaged courses that I developed in partnership with the Iowa Initiative for Sustainable Communities was with a community museum in Edgewood, Iowa. And it was basically a historic museum, very focused on community history. And the students who I had at that time were in a course I was leading called Museums in a Digital World. And so what we did is we developed a communication plan for this small community museum to help them connect with their community members and get the word out about the things that they were doing and the kinds of stories that they were seeking. And so that was very helpful to them.
With your background in museum studies, how did you first start to connect what you were teaching in the classroom as a potential opportunity to take that outside into the community for community engaged learning?
My work in museum studies began with me working in the field. So I have a career prior to coming to the university and teaching. I worked as a museum educator for over 20 years. And so in that work, I did a lot of community engaged programming and outreach. And so that's something that really became a part of my professional being. It's in my blood to be connected with the community. And so when I came to teaching, I really couldn't imagine teaching without embedding community engaged practice into my courses. And I know that students needed to have they need to have practical experiences. There's nothing worse than learning something in the classroom and then going out into the field and finding, oh, this isn't anything like what I learned, I can't apply it. And so providing students with concrete examples of how to apply the things that they were learning in the classroom is really, really important.
With you coming from an experience or a professional experience of working in the field as part of museum studies, did you begin to incorporate community engaged components right from the very beginning, or was it something that you adopted later on?
Something that I did from the beginning, even before I knew about community engaged resources and teaching resources on campus. Um, because like I said, I was working in the field. So when I came, I just had this idea about how I would teach these things in this community engaged way. And so it just happens to be that my particular discipline is interdisciplinary. We have historians, we have artists, we have business people who are all in the field. And so it's just community engaged work, working with museums in our communities and other culturally based organizations is just part of what we do. And so, yeah, it really was a natural fit. It was something I was doing before. But that said, resources are valuable things. And so looking on campus for resources of how to best do community engaged work, because it's not something that's completely natural. I mean, there is definitely it can be challenging at times, especially when you're working as a faculty member trying to teach your students, but also meet the needs of the community partners. And so having resources on campus has really been a huge benefit to the work, and it has only allowed me to increase the kind of community engaged projects. Like instead of just having one class that's community engaged, almost every single one of my classes has some level of community engagement.
So you mentioned the challenge as a faculty member of balancing the needs of the students with those of the community partners. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like in practicality for you as an instructor, and what best practices you use to maintain that balance?
Yes. So one of the things that's obviously the most important part of my teaching is developing learning goals for my students and making sure that they reach those learning goals. Many of my students come into the classroom, they may have background in grant writing or developing digital interpretive materials like online exhibits and things like that, or they may not. And so part of my job as a faculty member is to get everybody on the same page. And so having students at different places can be a challenge. I want them to be able to meet all the learning goals that I set forth, for them for the semester. And so depending on the project that we're planning on doing, I have to be sure that the project is, number one, that it's something that my students can accomplish within the course of a semester. It can't be a project that's too big, or at least a part of a project that they can complete so that they can feel successful. But, understanding that they also have to learn skills, right, prior to doing that. And so developing a timeline that allows me to teach to the students the things that they need and provide them with the resources and the tools and the content that they need to do the work of the community engaged project, to give them time to apply the concepts that we're teaching. But also there has to be time placed into the semester where they're meeting with community partners, because I can't just teach them and have them do the work by themselves. That the whole point of community engaged work is to be connected with the community partner. And so there has to be time built into the semester where we're meeting with the community partner, making sure that we're on the same page, that we understand the needs of the project.
You mentioned the rewarding parts of this experience for community members and students as well. Can you think of a good example of a student that had a particularly rewarding experience, maybe that benefited them as they moved out of the classroom and into the field?
I think that anytime we're able to connect students with professional networks, it can lead to lots of different successes. I've had students tell me that the projects that they've done in my classes have helped give them an idea of what they wanted to do as they moved into, the career path, and helped guide them into one area of museum work over another. I've also had students tell me I definitely don't ever want to do that. And so, and it goes both ways. And I know that I've had students working for institutions where it's led to a job. Not with that particular institution, but the project itself was similar to something that somebody else was looking for, and they said, "Hey, look, I've done this." So it led to a job. So those are always really exciting connections to make.
You mentioned accessing resources through the Office of Community Engagement. Are there any particular examples you can point to of where resources that were provided by that office were helpful to you in your course?
I know that specifically I was able to attend some community engaged focused workshops that allowed me to hear ideas from other faculty and other community partners, to hear what worked in their situation, maybe what didn't work. And that really allowed me to broaden my ideas of what community engaged teaching could look like. So going back to that, there's no one way to do it. I think being able to reach out to the office and know that they've got lots of faculty engaged in lots of different kinds of community engaged projects.
Thank you, Heidi, for being here today to share how Hawkeyes are making an impact in communities across Iowa and beyond through community engagement.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Heidi Lung is the Associate Professor of Instruction for Museum Studies in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Iowa. To learn more about how you can get involved as a student, faculty member, or community partner, visit www.engagement.uiowa.edu and join us next week when we talk with a student about how community engaged coursework helped them inside and outside the classroom.